This has to be the longest vintner's tale, because our vintner, Harry Waugh, is vintage 1904, which makes him not just Britain's most influential wine merchant, but also the most mature. He's been showered with honours, and it's typical of the man that this is where he chooses to keep them. Harry Waugh had to work his way up in the wine trade, which he joined by chance as a clerk after leaving school at 16. He built up Harvey's of Bristol as a fine wine merchant capable of training the current head of Christie's wine department and the head of Allied Lyons. He's written a series of wine diaries and is consultant to Annabelle's, for instance, but has always been much more celebrated in America than here. When you were working for Block Grey and Block, port was very important in your portfolio.
Yes.
But the firm had to make a very expensive decision, didn't it?
Yes. The firm been doing badly. All the wine trade was doing badly. Right through the 28, 29 recession was bad, and then there was the rise of Hitler. And every time Hitler moved into a new country, the stock exchange used to collapse and our customers drop away. And so we had no money. And meanwhile, the cream of the young men from London were joining the army and going to Sandhurst. And they're having me properly brought up. They taught to drink port every night. And one of our marks, which we sold, my firm, Block Grey and Block, sold to Sandhurst, was called Big Ben Port, which was vintage character port. And we hadn't got enough money to buy all this port that was demanded of us.
Quite cheap port, really, needed.
Well, it was, yes, it was vintage character, wood port. So to make ends meet, we bought a lot of the 1931 vintage, which was, we couldn't sell. You couldn't sell port. It was only 5 shillings a bottle, which was nothing. Not 5 shillings is now, but it was nothing. And so we decanted those bottles and put into the Big Ben. So the young men at Sandhurst drank really good Big Ben port.
And that's a port that today would sell for about £350 a bottle.
Something like that. It is the port of the century, you know.
And in 1939, just before the war, you did something that was pretty revolutionary for a wine merchant then.
Yes, it was thanks to the late Alan Cishel. He asked me to go abroad with him on a wine trip.
Because most wine merchants then didn't travel.
No, hardly anybody in the wine trade went abroad at all. And I thought it was a wonderful opportunity, and we went to Champagne first. And then we went to Alsace, and nobody in England knew anything about Alsace at all. But Alan Cishel was very keen on it. We tasted, worked morning to night, tasting. And then we went to Burgundy and then to Bordeaux. So it was a great experience. And extraordinary, driving on the roads then, the main roads there are now, and they used to be held up by flocks of sheep and goats and cows and things like that.
Didn't you take a stand on Beaujolais as well?
Yes, I did. I found about 1949, 50, I'd only been back in the wine trade about 4 or 5 years, and I realised the Beaujolais shipped to England all came through the big firms in Beaune, which were 100 miles north of the Beaujolais district. And I thought perhaps I could be able to do something better. So through a friend, I got an introduction finally through a broker in Beaujolais. And he introduced me to the leading growers, and so Harvey's had wine which came direct from the growers' cellars.
As you know, we haven't got a Californian Chardonnay on our list at the moment, so we thought it would be a good idea to try a variety of the Californians to see if there was one that you thought was suitable both on price and quality, so we can see if there's anything we want to buy.
We want one or more?
One, I think one. We've got one Australian, I think we would only want one, yes, because it's early days for our members.
Harry, where would you like to start?
I start here.
Start up there. All right.
Harry, the archetypal wine trade gentleman, serves on the wine committee of 2 London clubs. This one regularly includes 3 masters of wine and a director of Christie's.
Harry, you probably have much more experience of Californian than we do, as you've been out there on so many occasions.
I was the first person ever to let people know California was good. First European, anyway.
Were you?
Nobody from Europe realised in it was.
When?
Yes, 60s. They changed their method altogether making the wine. It had been done in huge redwood tanks. And then they kept it in bottle only for a year and sold it off, and it was pretty poor stuff.
You've been involved with the Bordeaux First Growth, Chateau Latour, since 1963. And Latour became a revolutionary property in franchise, didn't it?
Oh, indeed, because we had to completely redo it. Our first vintage, 1963, fortunately it was not a good vintage. We lost one of the huge vats of wine which were fermenting. All the wine was lost. And we suddenly realized the vats were over 100 years old and all had to be replaced. And there were great arguments as whether we should have stainless steel or wooden vats, the original traditional ones, or cement lined, glass lined cement tanks. And because I'd been in California and seen how good the stainless steel were, how effective they were, thank goodness they listened, and so we installed these vats, which caused a sensation. But fortunately, 64 was our first vintage. It was probably the best wine of the whole vintage, so that proved that the stainless steel was good.
Technology is a lot more important in today's wine world, isn't it? Do you think wines made today are better or worse?
Oh, I think infinitely better, infinitely better. Yes, well, it's here.
Now, this one, this looks
Well, that's,
very smart.
Yes, that's Ordre National du Mérite.
And that's what allows you to wear this
That's
blue
it, that's
thing
it.
on your suits.
That's,
But I know in France they can't say Harry Waugh, can they? What do they say?
oh, they can't pronounce it now.
No.
Waugh, Waugh,
Harry Waugh.
Harry Waugh, yes, that's right.
Now this is one that
Now this I'm more
very
proud of
rare,
than anything else.
very rare.
This is the
yeah.
greatest compliment the wine trade could pay me.
An
without
honorary,
exception.
an honorary Master of Wine. So you are allowed to be an MW without ever having had to take an exam.
Not taking an exam, yes. So I'm very, very proud of that one.
A lot of people would envy that.
Mhm.
Now let's see what goes behind here. Why did you ask Harry to be a director of John Armitt Wines?
I thought I needed a bit of credibility. And I've always admired Harry. I thought he was the greatest man in the wine trade in England and had been for many years, and the forerunner, really, of many of the things that I've always wanted to do. It's a curious thing in England. I think in a way we're wary of success and fame, and we don't appreciate it in the way that we should. And I think there's another aspect which is specific to England, which is that we don't respect age in the way that happens in other parts of the world.
And what about your own cellar?
Well, alas, I did have a most lovely cellar, but having these two children
Now these
to
are
educate,
your twins,
My
Jamie and
twins.
Harriet, who arrived when you were how old?
69. And it was in the headlines. There was William Hickey of the Daily Mail. So headlines, Harry Waugh, his twins at 69. They're now aged 18, and their education has cost so much I've had to sell most of my wine to pay for it. I've still got a little left to pay for the rest of it. It's saddening because there's some lovely stuff there.